Okay. Okay, we're almost 10 seconds.
We're good. You're live.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining the Content Strategy with Digital Creators in Brewing, featuring Sarah Flora, also known as Flora Brewing, and Natalya Watson, also known as Beer with Nat on social media. I'm Ash Elliott, your moderator for the session here at the Women's International Beer Summit. I'm also behind the scenes at all things Flora Brewing, as well as produce the podcast Brewing After Hours with Sarah. And I do marketing and PR consulting for alcohol brands, founded the group Women of the Bevolution, and currently help out with membership for the Pink Boot Society Los Angeles chapter. If you want to connect, I'm Ash Elliott or Women of the Bevolution on Instagram. Now, before we get started, we have some logistical things. So grab your beer or michelada or whiskey or hop water, whatever you're feeling right now. Let's get into it. So first of all, attendees are automatically on mute. So this to eliminate any background noises like dogs barking, helicopters, your roommate playing drums, whatever it might be. But you can always ask any questions that you have by submitting them through the Ask a Question box at the bottom of your screen. We'll get as many of those questions at the end of the presentation. So I'll keep an eye out for that. Also, if you see a question that has already been asked that you'd like to hear the answer to, rather than repeating it, make sure to vote for it using the up arrows in the question box. The most popular questions will float to the top so we can get to them first during the Q&A. You can also make comments throughout the event in the chat on the right hand of the screen, but keep in mind that the only questions in the official Ask a Question feed will be answered at the end of the event. So if you want it answered, make sure you put your question in there. And I'll be posting links as we go, so keep an eye out. I'll post links to both Sarah and Nat, so you can easily just go and follow them and check out their websites and all that. If you have any connectivity issues during the seminar or you notice your video's lagging, there's a few things you can try. First, try quick refresh. That's always the best option. Refreshing usually corrects most issues in Crowdcast. If that doesn't work, try clicking pause on your video player, waiting a second, and then hitting play. If neither of those options work, you can try lowering your video resolution by hovering over your mouse over the video player and clicking the gear icon to the bottom right. From there, you can lower the resolution to either 720 or 360. Finally, as a worst case scenario, you can try putting your video into compatibility mode. To do so, click the link on the bottom left underneath the live stream that says Get Audio/Video Help. You'll be prompted with some information about compatibility mode and how to activate it. We want to take a second to highlight the scholarship opportunities our sponsors have made available. Head over to the website, queenofbeer.beer, and make sure you sign up for the scholarships you are interested in. Winners will be drawn at random and notified by email after the summit. Last but not least, we are recording this event, and the recording will be available at this very same link a few minutes after we end the live broadcast, not podcast. Ooh, podcast always on the mind. If you'd like to download the presentation slides, you can do so by clicking the green button at the bottom of your screen. Okay, that's finally it from me. Now I'd like to hand it off to our digital mastermind speakers to share some insight into the world of creating content in the beer industry. To start, why don't each of you introduce yourselves and share where you're based, what you do in beer. Natalya, why don't you go first for us?
Sure. Thanks for that intro, Ash. That was amazing. Very well prepared. We're ready to go. So my name is Natalya Watson. I am a beer educator, beer sommelier, and advanced cicerone. And I run a virtual beer school that I founded last year. I'm the author of a book called Beer, Taste the Evolution in 50 Styles. And I have a podcast called Beer with Nat. So I like to say I am all beer all the time, essentially. And I am based in London. So I'm coming to you guys at 7:30 my time. So a bit later. I'm towards the end of my day, but I'm very excited to be here and chat with everybody.
All right. I am Sarah Flora. I would also consider myself a beer educator, but I think I came at it in a little bit of a different way. I started on Instagram, where most people who know me have found me. And then I started a YouTube to educate people on how to homebrew. And my latest venture is a podcast, Brewing After Hours with Flora. And that's more about stories and talking to professionals in the industry and scientists and just people who have a vague interest in beer, but are also into super awesome other things that will relate, but not so much in a technical aspect. Like, we're not telling you how to homebrew, we're telling you about who used to homebrew and how beer started. So that's kind of what I've been up to.
And both of you have kind of gotten into the beer world on like so differently. And so I'd love to hear, Natalya, why don't we start with you about your journey in beer and your background and how you kind of got into this industry?
Yeah, so it's definitely very roundabout. And I think many people have that experience coming to beer. I think now we've got this generation of people learning about beer when they're in university and they kind of realize, oh, I can have a beer career right after I graduate. That was certainly not the case for me. So I studied microbiology when I was an undergrad at UCLA. Then I thought I wanted to study science, go get a PhD, get into research, but I actually found out I wasn't all that good at doing science. I was much better at talking about it than doing it. So I'd always had this interest in science communications. Then I went to get my master's in public health, and that was focused on food safety and nutrition specifically. Again, I thought I wanted to work for the FDA or the USDA. I interned in Washington, D.C. for a summer doing food policy. Realized that wasn't the right fit for me either, but it happened to be in public health school that I got introduced to beer by my friends that were in the program. And I did actually use my degree for a few years, even though I'm not doing much with public health now, but promoting a responsible drinking message, I suppose, is important to what I do. So I worked for an organic baby food company for 3 years, doing their communications and marketing and talking to people about food safety and nutrition. But when I was in New York, outside of my working hours, all my time was spent basically geeking out about beer, drinking beer in different craft beer bars, going to breweries, starting a blog, starting some home brewing. So after 3 years of that, I thought, okay, I'm going to see if I can make beer my career. And to do that, I kind of just changed everything because I knew it would be so different than what I was doing previously. So I moved to London. I grew up in Northern Ireland, so I'm a UK citizen. I really thought I'd be here for 3 months, work in a bar, get some experience, and move back to the US and work in beer over there. That didn't happen. It's been almost 6 years that I've been here. So I moved here in August 2015, worked behind a bar called Mother Kelly's for a few months. Then I got a job at Duvel, the Belgian brewery, doing their UK marketing, using my marketing experience from the baby food company combined with my passion for beer. So I think it's really important if you're thinking about getting into beer to think about those transferable skills from previous careers, because we all have them and we just need to figure out how to put them to use. And after being at Duvel for 3.5 years, they really supported me in getting my certified Cicerone, getting my beer sommelier qualifications. And after that, they also supported me in writing my book as well. But I really just decided, well, I love Duvel beers. I don't only want to talk about Duvel beers. So I set out to start my own business as a beer educator to talk about all different kinds of beers and share my knowledge of and passion for beer to hopefully bring more people and more women especially into the space. So that was in June 2019 that I went freelance. My first focus really was finishing my book and then getting my advanced Cicerone. So I qualified for my advanced Cicerone in January 2020. My book came out in March 2020, literally the week that we went into lockdown here in the UK. So none of the plans went to plan when it came to the book launch. But tapping into this move to a virtual world, I ended up doing a virtual book club last April, so a year ago now, to talk through the different chapters of the book. People were really enjoying it and really keen to continue connecting online. So I started a lockdown beer school. I put a link out onto the internet, a Google Meet link, and people would just join me every Thursday to talk about different beery topics. That went so well, I structured it into a formal program, which is now my virtual beer school. So that prepares people for the Cicerone Level 1, the Certified Beer Server. And then I've also got my podcast still going, the book, and then what else? Oh my goodness, all kinds of beery things at all times. Still doing trainings and tastings and other virtual events as well. So yeah, that's me. Literally all beer all the time, as I say.
That's amazing, and congrats on the book and the virtual school launch. That is incredible. I have posted some links in the chat, and I'll continue to post links for everyone to check out.
Thank you.
And so Sarah, obviously I'm very familiar with your story, and we met in the home brewing scene here in Los Angeles. So please, share with us how you got into home brewing and how it's led you here.
All right. Well, yeah, as Ash said, I am based in Los Angeles and every day trying to move to Washington, but she won't let me. So I actually kind of got into craft beer when I was in college. I went to school for art, and my career is actually in art. I still work for an art gallery, and I think like as you said, transferable skills. Like I think a lot of the skills that I developed going to school for art. I was a painter and then working for a gallery for 7 years actually is very transferable. When you work for a small team of 4 people, you kind of learn how to do everything. So honestly, I don't think without that background, I would have gotten into like beer marketing. And, you know, you kind of learn how to structure photography and edit video and all of that. So my timeline has kind of been more towards the marketing side rather than the educational side. So I actually, this is like the story I tell everyone. I bought my husband a homebrew kit for his birthday one year. He did not take to it. Didn't touch it, actually. So I was like, screw it. I'm going to make us beer for his birthday. And after that, it was all over. Like, I now have an entire garage full of equipment that I haven't used in like 2 years. And I'm just like, all right, I just need to stop getting things because it is truly an addiction. So I started homebrewing. I started the Instagram. It just kind of blew up. I was extremely engaged in the homebrewing community on Instagram. And I think that's also why it blew up, but we can talk about those strategies later. And, you know, I really fell in love with the community more than anything. Coming from an art world, the community is very different. And beer is just very welcoming and it's very social. So it's just kind of lends itself to social media, I think. And then I realized that, yeah, I like taking photos of myself, I guess. But I realized that I actually wanted to kind of contribute something more. So I started my YouTube channel to teach people because I'm like the kind of person who Googles everything. So I know a lot of people don't necessarily learn that way. So it's kind of nice to be able to make videos and coach people on how, like, what I've screwed up in the past and like how to avoid my mistakes. And I think that posting your mistakes in general, especially as a woman in brewing, is very valuable because I constantly have people coming to me and being like, oh, you're like very humble about your stuff. And I'm just like, I truly don't know what I'm doing. So it's, yeah, just follow me on my journey, I guess. But yeah, and then the podcast just kind of came about very naturally. A network reached out and Ash and I had actually talked about doing a podcast for about a year before, and I was hesitant, but I was like, if not now, when? So yeah, and it's actually been super fun and way more fun than I thought. It's fascinating to be able to talk to like experts in their field, and I'm like, I would have never had an opportunity to do that without the podcast. So that's where we are now, and in the future, I plan on opening a brewery in Washington.
Yes, that's great. Can't wait for that.
If Ash allows you to move there, apparently.
He's gonna have to move with me.
I will there's that, and then also I'll represent California for you. So you know, it's a team. But I do want to. We'll get it podcast stuff. We're gonna get into that. That's one of my questions for sure. But I absolutely love that both of you, went into home brewing to first learn, and I think that is like, for me, such a gateway into breaking into the industry. It's extremely important to, and have this like network of other women that are doing the same thing to help empower one another to learn. And it's like, it's that DIY kind of attitude. And I think you have to do that, especially now in the beer industry, because it's hard to break into. It's still very male leaning. So I think that's what I want to like emphasize on, is like how important that is. And with that said, I'd love for you both to share, and Sarah, I was about to call you Flora. I always have you like as Flora first in my in my phone. So I think that's why.
In college, everyone called me Flora. No one called me Sarah.
I mean, eventually you and I are going to have our own name together, because sometimes I log into your Zoom by mistake and everyone's like, what, who is this?
Flash.
Yeah, there we go. No, I love that both of you kind of learned, through homebrewing as well. So Sarah, for those looking to learn and get into brewing and into homebrewing, just to start learning, what is some advice that you have for just starting out, like the basics, like just, anything that you like, any like other people that were brewing that you look to for advice or tutorials or books and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, everyone who I know who homebrews has this book on their shelf. It is called How to Brew by John Palmer. It's basically like the homebrewing Bible. Anything you want to know. Yep, there it is. Yeah. That's exactly what my copy looks like, with all the Post-it notes. I've got like
modeling it for you.
Yeah. Notes. It's like written in the margin. It's insane.
This is the Bible. Yep, get that.
100% get that book. I also really enjoyed Randy Mosher's Radical Brewing, and that's more of like a fun book to get into home brewing. It does give you some of the basics, but it's more about like break the rules, it doesn't matter kind of thing. But in home brewing as an art, you have to learn the rules to be able to break them. So pick up How to Brew. There's also a ton of resources online. I think when I started, it was Brew Your Own that I used a lot. They have checklists on everything you need to be doing as you brew that you can just literally print out, cross off. That's how I did pretty much all of my brews until I memorized exactly how to do everything. There's apps that can really help you out. I personally use Brewfather. There's also Beersmith, and you can develop your own recipes in there because they have guidelines. So you don't have to know everything. You can basically start out with a very small base of knowledge, and as you work, you basically just learn more and learn more and learn more, and you can learn different mashing styles and different hopping methods as you go. And I would start out with a kit. There's nothing wrong with starting out with a kit. I actually recently brewed a American ale from More Beer for like a how to brew kind of tutorial, which you can find on my website. And the beer turned out great. It was like a very standard ale, but it was fantastic. And, even if you do extract, it can be good. And I think that's a myth that is going around, that like extract isn't as good as all grain, but when you're starting out, it's fine. It just is a little expensive. What else? I'm trying to think. Other people. I have this written down. I hit all my points.
I was gonna add that like you're into home brewing clubs as well, and that that has been such a resource for you. You're in SoCal Cerveceros, which is like one of the biggest homebrew clubs in the country, and then also the Maltos Falcons,
which is the oldest homebrew club in the country
and the best named one. That's just incredible.
Really
right? And I think like having that support system, and like even with SoCal Cerveceros, there's like a group for just the women, SoCal Cerveceros. And if you're looking to get into brewing, I think that's like the first start, because that social element, and I know they have happy hours every week. They have educational like guest speakers and things like that are just so informative. So I just wanted to add how important that is for me too. And Natalya, I mean, I'd love to hear how you started kind of learning about beer as well. I mean, you have your own classes. So like, I think that's something, if you could share a bit more about your classes as well and what you go into and how informative that is for anyone trying to take like the Cicerone program,
Well, I thought Sarah was going to say this is her second book, because I had this one handy. So
I don't have that one.
Oh my goodness, this is my go-to. And again, this is the second edition, but you can still see how many, oh my goodness, all of the different Post-it notes everywhere in the book. So this is a really great resource for anyone looking to sort of start learning more about beer from the basics. It's quite chunky, but it covers everything from what beer is made from, how we taste, beer and food pairing, the brewing process, loads of different beer styles. So I love this book, Tasting Beer by Randy Mosher, and it's also the main resource that the Cicerone program recommends. So I think a challenge, like there's so much great information online, and a lot of the digital content creation, when we come onto that, so much of what I've learned in that space, like how to start a podcast, how to write a book proposal, that was all by Googling it. But with beer, sometimes, because there is a bit of misinformation, it can be hard to know sort of what sources to trust. So the Cicerone program is essentially a parallel to the WSET program for wine and spirits, but the equivalent for beer. And through them, I use their resources, not only their syllabus, so they kind of tell you what should we know about various topics in beer, but also the recommended resource that they suggest. So books like Tasting Beer by Randy Mosher, How to Brew is another really great one on that list. The Brewmaster's Table by Garrett Oliver, if you're keen to learn more about beer and food pairing. So I use those sorts of things, but I do also want to help make sure that we do have the right information available online. So I've created my own content in line with the Cicerone program to learn more about things like the basics, as I've said. So what is beer made from? How do we taste it? How is it made? And so I've created some very simple videos and articles that live on my website called discovering.beer. So anyone can access them and kind of get the basics about beer, understanding the building blocks of the different flavors that we might find. And then from there, that's sort of the pre-reading that we do for my course. If you are keen to go for a certification, like the first level from the Cicerone certification program, which is the certified beer server, that one is all self-study, as is everything through the Cicerone program. They kind of give you all these links to great resources and say, all right, go read them. And for some people, I know it can be challenging to carve out the time, especially around a different career, a busy life, etc. So my virtual beer school course, we meet for 12 weeks, and it's just an hour and a half each week. And we've got a live session together where I do a lesson, and then we have time for questions and discussion. And it's proved really fun, and I'm just so pleased with the number of people that have taken to it. I'm running it for the third time now. The previous courses and this one as well have all sold out. So the current live session is full, but I do offer a listen back option. So you can purchase for £30. I'm not sure what that is in dollars, but it's not very much. But you can essentially get audio access to all of the lessons and listen back in your own time and get these sort of 12 weekly installments to get you ready for the certified beer server exam if you're interested. Another person I want to recommend her work because it's amazing is M. Sauter. She's an advanced Cicerone, and she's got what she calls visual beer education on her website called Pints and Panels. It's all free, and she takes all these different beer styles and explains them in one single panel as a cartoon. So there are lots of great resources out there. And if you have any concerns about who to trust, I would say look for people who have gone through the Cicerone certification program as a way to make sure that if you're studying for that certification as well, you're getting the right information to get ready.
Amazing. Thank you,
I
Nat.
have another one that just occurred to me.
Please.
In line with the Cicerone is the beer judge certification program.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, is that only US based? I think it's mainly US based.
No, you can do it here as well in the UK.
Oh,
yeah.
Great.
You can become a BJCP judge.
Yeah, so they do style guidelines. So they have a style guideline for pretty much every style of beer. And a lot of the homebrew competitions you'll enter, they actually base them on those guidelines. So if you're homebrewing and you plan on entering into a competition, go to bjcp.org, I believe, and they'll have everything you need. And they list all the competitions on their site if you're interested, which it's an invaluable tool to submit to homebrew competitions because they will pick out things that you never knew were wrong with your beer and you will grow from it. I promise.
It's a good way to learn off flavors as well. Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Which is very important in beer. We got to know what it tastes good and when it doesn't taste so good and why.
Exactly. So I'm going to go back to content because this is what we're here for. We're talking about content. So I'd love to hear, Sarah, let's start with you about what is kind of your key goals when developing content? Like what are some important items to consider, whether it's on, through your YouTube content or for your podcast?
Yeah. Well, I'll also talk about Instagram. I mean, so YouTube, the content is basically trying to teach something in general. And I do a lot of recipe building. I do a lot of brew days, and I do a lot of how to put together this homebrew equipment that you got in the mail and how to use it. because a lot of it does not come with instructions. I just got a canner in the mail the other day, no instructions. And I'm just like, I guess I'll record myself figuring this out, because if I'm confused and I've been doing this for like 5 or 6 years, imagine if someone who just started got this piece in the mail. I remember when I was a home brewer just starting out, trying to read a kit instruction, and I'm just like, I have no idea what any of these words mean. So I'm trying to like kind of demystify home brewing in itself and making beer, and like also trying to instill confidence in people that you don't have to do everything perfectly. Because I'm a perfectionist, and that's how I walked into it, and you get slapped in the face by all the mistakes you make real quick. So for YouTube, it's kind of educational. Instagram, it's a visual medium. It's just photos, basically. You can review beers on there and whatnot. I typically find that people are way more interested in photos of actual people doing things. So home brewing, like, oh, I tried this new piece of equipment. That's typically what at least when I was like seriously doing the Instagram promoting everything, I've kind of fallen off at this point, but I do have some tips. High quality photos. Our phones are amazing now. I just got a new iPhone and the camera is bonkers on it. If you don't post high quality photos, you will not get any traction. Another thing is if you have people in your photos, the algorithm likes you better. Don't know why, just happens. If you just post a picture of a beer, not going to go over well. For YouTube, if you want traction, a high quality thumbnail is key. You actually have to take a photo and not just pull a screenshot. I've done beta testing. It's crazy how different the algorithm likes you if you actually do a high quality thumbnail versus a screenshot. And I mean, I just kind of try to be myself more than anything. I am a weird introvert who nerds out on a lot of things, and I feel like that comes through a bit. Also, I'm very scattered, if you couldn't tell based on how I'm speaking in front of all of you lovely people. So yeah, I mean, social media is inherently fake to some degree, and I think that the more humbleness, the more individuality, and the more honesty that we can bring to it, the better everything will be. And the beer world is very accepting, I have found. So, just be yourself. Someone will like it.
I have to say, there was a comment that is making me laugh right now from Angelica that is, brew day equals well-organized shit show.
Mm-hmm. I
mean, something's bound to go wrong, right? But it's a learning experience, and that's just, it is what it is. And it's, it's fine to be transparent. Not everything needs to be picture perfect,
Yeah.
It's just like it's cooking, it's the same thing. It's like shit goes wrong.
I always say that when I have a perfect brew day, I will quit brewing.
Okay, well, hopefully that's for a very long time.
It'll never happen, I promise you.
Okay. I got nervous. But thank you, Sarah. Okay, so Nat, why don't you tell us a bit about kind of your kind of content strategy when you're doing your classes, your YouTube, your podcast, all that?
Yeah, so they kind of, in my mind, I see them as sort of different boxes based on what I'm trying to deliver through each one. So I'd say the overarching theme is really, it's about education. So how can I teach people about beer in a way that I know I'm taking the information from the right sources and I'm referencing those sources? So that's really important to me. In my early days as a beer blogger, I wrote a blog post and I didn't share the links to where I got the information, and I got trolled for it in a beer advocate forum, and it was a really unpleasant experience. So I will say, if you're trying to educate people, make sure that you do always cite your sources, share where you're getting the information from, because as I've said, there's lots of misinformation on the internet. Maybe we are finding the incorrect information, unfortunately, but at least if you're saying where you got it from, then we can kind of track those links back and try and get things corrected. So sharing the right information, as I've said, is important. So how can I share educational content about beer in a way that's engaging and accessible. So that space of sort of translating from science to non-scientists is where I really like to sit. But then also thinking about, really for Instagram and for YouTube as well, how do we make this visually engaging so people actually get their eyeballs on it and want to look at it, read the caption, learn a little bit more about beer. So that's sort of the education piece for me. I think it's also interesting to show people what being a beer educator looks like, because I don't know if you feel this way at all, Sarah, but for me, I kind of feel like I'm making it up day by day. There's no sort of job description for what a beer educator is or does or looks like. And so there can be all different kinds of aspects to my day, whether I'm trying to sell my book, or I'm doing a virtual tasting for someone, or I'm, talking with you all this evening, or I'm writing my lesson plan, or I'm teaching the course. So kind of showing those different things to people is important as well, because I want them to sign up for my courses. And that means they're going to spend an hour and a half, 2 hours with me each week out of their time, which everyone's time is so precious. So you kind of need to know who I am and what makes me tick and why I'm so passionate and what you're going to get out of spending this time with me. So I think showing a little bit of my personality, as Sarah said, is a really important thing to do as well through social media. And that has really then let people kind of through word of mouth say, oh yeah, Nat really knows what she's on about. I may not be the best at social media, but people kind of who join my class then spread the word to other people as well. I do think quite differently about my podcast though, in terms of content. Like that for me is all about shining a spotlight on someone else. So I don't want to share my story there. I want the guests to be able to share theirs. So thinking about what is the aim? What am I trying to get out of each of these different platforms? But I think also a really important takeaway is, well, I do think that sharing the right information is really important beer-wise. Beer is fun inherently. This is a passion project for all of us. So we need to find ways to keep it fun and not take it too seriously as well. And that comes from just being a human and having some personality, knowing we're not going to be perfect.
Definitely. And Nat, it seems I can hear you clearly. I think everyone can, but your video is a little blurry. So I just wanted to flag that in case you need to maybe refresh your browser for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go and talk with Sarah, and then just when you're ready, we will bring you back in. Okay. So in terms of content, the biggest thing is, the beer community is so engaging on social media. I think you see you see Reddit, you see like the Facebook groups and all of that. So Sarah, how do you stay engaged on social media through your own channels and through these other, there's just all these different groups and there's Reddit and all that. Any tips that you can share with us to keep kind of, you're just everything's still going and everyone know that you're a real person,
Yeah. How I actually it just kind of happened naturally for me, but how the Instagram kind of blew up was, I was on the hashtags of like craft beer or home brewing, just like seeing what other people were doing. And by way of just seeing it, you end up liking and commenting. And that's actually how you show people that you are out there. So if you have a standalone Instagram and you're not engaging with the community at all, no one's going to find you. So if you're trying to build an audience or a community or anything, you actually have to be very engaged with everyone else who is on the platform. The same thing goes for YouTube. I try to, I've been very bad lately, lots of change in my life with moving, but I try to respond to a lot of comments, and I do these things called premieres. When a video launches, you basically have a chat box, and it's actually amazing. I have like some people who usually show up and like on a regular basis, and we get to chat about what's going on with us. And I honestly feel like I've gained so many friends from just, responding to comments, responding to DMs, whatever. I actually just got to visit one of my friends who is also a beer influencer up in Washington, and she's now marketing for my favorite brewery, Silver City. And, it's just like these relationships that you make. And honestly, I met Ash after my Instagram had blown up, and we were like, one of my coworkers and I were starting a craft beer club for women, and that's how I met Ash. And like, now we're extremely good friends, business partners. And, you know, it's very important to just kind of be fully involved in the community, especially if you know you're trying to make your name for yourself. Yeah.
No, I mean, that's it.
Trying to think of like podcasts, but that's just totally your realm. And I'm I don't know.
Well, podcast is, that's a whole, we'll get into that, but that's a whole other thing. But you're right on. It is like, again, going back to, it's the homebrew clubs. It's, it's engaging in those types of conversations online too. Like there's, there's so many different Facebook groups now, like the craft beer girls, and I always call it wrong, but the craft beer girls one, and there's one in LA for women too. And, like the group that I started, Women of the Bevolution, like I think it's really important to like find those groups, engage, and just find where the community is who might help you, you might help them. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right on. And it's interesting to just see, behind the scenes for Flora Brewing, that like the international kind of, reach that you've gotten. And, you have, people in like Brazil and the UK that will message you. And it's just like, I mean, I keep track because I'm like, I can't wait to go on tour, like a brewing tour.
It's totally mind-boggling, but it's like such a testament to how much of an international community the beer world is. I mean, beer's just everywhere. And I feel like Instagram, YouTube, and like honestly Reddit, the r/homebrewing, that place is awesome.
It's huge. It has like 1 million
it's
plus.
got 1 million followers.
Yeah.
So if you think about it, like all of these platforms are basically like digital homebrew clubs. Like we're all sharing information, we're all socializing, and that's essentially what a homebrew club does. But some of us are more comfortable on the internet than in real life. I'm a total introvert, so like living online has always been my thing. And I am just so much more comfortable sharing and asking for advice from people on the internet than I would necessarily in real life.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. But Nat, welcome back. Your video feed looks great. So we're back and running. But yeah, so the question was, how do you kind of keep engaged on social media? So I'd love to hear kind of like, how you kind of do that with everything that you have going on.
Yeah, I think with the virtual book club I started that then turned into lockdown beer school, that then turned into virtual beer school. For me, I think so much of that had to do with luck. Like we were in this very unknown time last April, March, where, the world just stopped moving and everyone turned to the internet. And because beer is inherently such a social space, and here in the UK, being in London, you bump into people at breweries and bars and tap rooms and beer festivals. So all of that connection that we're so used to, we couldn't have anymore. So there was just sort of this, I guess, it makes sense now, but at the time, I didn't realize people would be so keen to connect online and just have your beer friends to share a beer with. And so, as I mentioned earlier, I literally put a link out to the internet to say, who wants to come and chat about beer with me? And that's what we did every Thursday. I think I've had 3 Thursdays off in the past year. Otherwise, I have been staring at my screen, much like this, talking to people about beer. So in order to help sort of build the course, so much of it was doing that initial bit of work for free, allowing people to know how I teach and getting to know my personality and welcoming them to join. The summer beer school that we did, it was all crowdsourced topics. So like, what do you want to learn more about with beer? So we talked all about different types of fermentation in one. We talked about beers from Japan in another, just because these are things people wanted to learn more about. And I had participants, so I'm based in London, but Bianca, who's watching today, is based in Brazil. We had Rachel dialing in from Hawaii at 7 a.m. her time, 7 p.m. our time, and just built this amazing international community of people. And it was through the word of mouth there that then people were encouraged to sign up for the beer school or just engage with my other content. So I think, showing up, delivering on what you've said you are going to do is really important. So set a weekly date, make sure that you do constantly deliver that content to people as they expect it. But just sort of thinking about Instagram and Twitter and other ways to then find what you do on YouTube or online courses, things like that. It is about having really high quality photos, definitely. I find hashtags to be really powerful to find other people who are in the same space, sort of as Sarah said, like women of beer, women in beer. I use those ones all the time to see what other women are creating content about beer, because I want to go find them and follow them and keep up with them as well. Posting at the right time is really important as well. For me, it's sort of like 7, 8 p.m. seems to be a really good time to post. I think that's because it's where my UK audience can engage, but it's also a decent time for folks in the States to engage as well. So thinking about those things is important. And just on the Instagram and Twitter bio, being really clear about what people can expect from you. So mine now literally says, "Hi, I'm Nat. I teach people about beer." So people just from the off know what I'm going to tell them about. So this is me teaching you stuff about beer. My life as a beer educator. If you want to come along, come and join. And I love seeing what other people are creating. It's not about us, only us having personalities, but it's other people showing their personalities and their creativity on social as well. So that's then why I want to spend time on it, and probably too much time, to be fair, seeing what other people are creating and what other ideas I can borrow from them, that sort of thing.
That's great. And I love that, that is such a good tip, that like, just be very straightforward on what you do. And like in your bios, things like that, I think is very key, because sometimes we overcomplicate it. We're like, we should just put like all these things, but no, like you teach people about beer. Like, you should just be very straightforward. And I mean, I love that you were doing like the book, the kind of the weekly video chats and things like that. That actually kind of goes into, I know, there's been so much video lately, and I think listening has become so huge now too, with like Clubhouse and podcasts and all that. So I definitely want us to chat a bit more about both of your podcasts. So Sarah, why don't you kind of start off and tell us about Brewing After Hours, and just like, what it takes to launch a podcast.
A dedicated business partner. When I started when we started Brewing After Hours, like Ash is seriously, like, you hear my voice, Ash does literally everything else.
Stop it.
It's true. So the idea was, there's a bunch of technical beer podcasts out there, and like, I listen to Brewlosophy. That's pretty much the only beer podcast I actually listen to. But I never really found one that kind of was more story focused. So I thought that would be a good idea. So I'm like a true crime podcast total buff. Like I'm like subscribed to Patreon for some of my true crime podcasts, like hardcore. So like the thing that I realized is like I really just enjoy stories, and I am terrible at telling them, but in a podcast form, fortunately, you can take notes and follow a script. So basically how the podcast works is we do a little dive on whatever our topic is. So like stories about, like, we're doing drunk animals. We're doing the history of women in beer. It's supposed to be fun and entertaining and like somewhat educational, but not super educational. It's not a technical podcast, but fortunately, having like such diverse topics, we get really awesome guests. So I talked to Travis Rupp about like trying to recreate the original IPA. And what I didn't realize when I was talking to him is that the IPA actually had to travel from England to India in a barrel. And he tried to recreate that journey, which I found fascinating. So it's things like this that, like, you can read articles about them, yeah, but I also honestly find that it's unless you know exactly what you're looking for, it's kind of hard to find articles about like these weird stories. So I think it's honestly just kind of an excuse for me to do research into like all the weird beer facts. But yeah, I try to make a podcast that I would want to listen to, and I think that's kind of what's happening. I mean, I think it's great.
I have to say, as someone that is the behind the scenes producer, I think, it takes a lot of effort. It takes the time, it takes the editing. making sure the volumes are all level, if you're doing Zoom versus like you're doing something scripted, there's just all these different factors that, you can't find in one place, like on the internet, I feel like. And everyone does different things, has different tools and different resources. So I think 100%, if someone wants to do it, they should go for it because it is fun and super educational. And I feel like with Sarah, it's so different from her normal content. We're kind of branching out and talking with industry professionals versus like home brewers and just covering very unique topics like drunk animals, how animals, the science behind animals getting drunk off of fermented fruit. Let's, make sure everyone understands the topic of discussion. I've learned a lot. We have a part 2 coming up, actually. I've never learned so much. Yeah, I've never learned so much about drunk animals. Anywho, but
yeah.
Nat,
also, we can wait 1 second. We've been through 4 microphones. We've been through 3 audio engineers. My husband is an audio engineer, and I've had him and his best friend, who we went to audio engineering school, look at podcast levels because, like, we've had some weird stuff happen. Zoom sounds weird sometimes, and I had a busted microphone. I recorded an entire Zoom thing on. We've had internet cut out. It's it's just like homebrewing. I feel like it's just like something's gonna go wrong.
It's bound to happen, but I think as long as we're transparent, that's all that matters. But Nat, it's funny. Actually, I just saw one of the comments from Bianca. She said, Nat inspired me to launch a beer podcast in Brazil. So that's incredible. Like, and just the reach, to be in Brazil, incredible. But yeah, I'd love to hear kind of, your take on it and your tips and things like that.
Yeah, a lot of the pain points that you guys have expressed, I have felt them as well. I think what's slightly different now. So for me, starting the podcast, I personally love career podcasts. So speaking about women in business and like how they've got to the top of their game. And there wasn't one of those about women in beer. So I thought, okay, if no one else is doing it, I'll do it. So I started mine in late 2018. And what's slightly different, well, I suppose in terms of starting it, it was just Googling, how do you start a podcast? And I got a USB mic called a Blue Yeti, so I can only record via my computer. That's slightly limiting if I wanted to do something, in the wild while someone's brewing and I wanted to be there. But my conversations take place like at my desk or at a table because I talk to women about their careers. And so it's talking about their career journey. How did you get into beer? What transferable skills have you brought? What advice do you have for other people who want to follow a similar career path? So learning how to do it all came from the internet. Learning how to edit it all came from the internet. I used GarageBand. I found some presets that I could apply to kind of fix the audio levels and make it sound a bit more professional. But the challenge is, now the new one is definitely recording virtually. I personally don't like it as much. I find it quite disconnected talking to people via a screen as opposed to being in person, because I used to always start my episodes by sharing a beer. And so that kind of sets the tone and we get to, have a chat, feel relaxed, and then get into the discussion about their career. And over the internet, not only are the sound levels different, the internet might cut out, all those sorts of things. There's just a slight disconnect that I don't love. But the other thing I really want to get across is how much time it takes and scheduling and how important that is. So with my first season, I only do 10 episodes at a time so I can allow myself to take a break, as this is very much an extra thing on top of my other work. And I recorded all my episodes, got them all out every other week, and that all worked fine. Second season, I started recording my episodes and thought, I'll be good to launch. I'll be able to keep up with this. I'll be able to deliver one every other week. I went on holiday for 2 weeks. I came back and unfortunately we had someone in the family pass away. So all my plans to continue recording and releasing and editing and preparing, that didn't happen. So I had to chuck up an old episode as a way to just fill the slot and buy myself a bit more time. Come to my third season, I decided to release every week. And the third season is unfinished. It was supposed to have 10 episodes. It only has 9 because the last one I was supposed to record, which was my first guest, Jaga Weiss, interviewing me about my career and my book launch, etc., had to get postponed because of COVID. So I would just say try and record all your episodes in advance so that you can then release them on your own schedule as opposed to trying to chase your tail, because I've done a lot of that and it is not fun. And you feel you're letting people down. And it really does take a lot of time to do the editing, get the levels right, create the social media content you want to go with the episodes as well. So while it is super fun, great conversations to have, just be prepared. There's a lot of work as well.
Yeah, no, that's right on. I think Sarah and I both understand that. You never know. So we're coming up to about 9 minutes left of the session. We're really just flying through here. So actually, I would love to kind of hear what you all think is the future of marketing in beer. So, Nat, if you'd like to kind of start it off, just kind of like content and like how to best engage the consumer, like what is kind of the future to you?
Yeah, I think the two things that I want to mention, the first one is that like this virtual piece is definitely here to stay. And I think for me, I still need to figure out what that looks like. So virtual beer school was great because everyone was a captive audience. You know, we didn't have anywhere to go. Now that at least here in the UK, our pubs have reopened, we can sit outside and have a drink. As people start leaving their homes more, are we going to want to do virtual events like this as much? I don't think it's going to be as much, but I do definitely think it is going to be something that will stay. So we're going to see, Instagram lives, we're going to see events like this, online courses as a way for people to learn on their own time and connect with fellow beer lovers in their country or abroad, that sort of thing. So this virtual aspect will definitely stay, in my opinion. The other thing I want to see more of is, as Sarah said, the Instagram algorithm loves seeing people. And I think we need to put ourselves out there a little bit more, because there's a great saying that a female beer writer here in the UK always says. Her name's Melissa Cole, and she always says, if you can't see, you can't be. And there's a big, challenge that we're still trying to overcome with diversity in the industry, not just more women, but also people of color, people with LGBTQ plus backgrounds. We kind of need to put ourselves out there more to show people that we are as much a part of the industry as the straight white men who most people think make it up. So I know not everyone loves to be the face of their Instagram or whatever. For many people, it's just about the beer. But I would love to see the people behind the accounts a little bit more so that people can then sort of claim our space as people who know and love and can share their passion for beer.
Yeah, no, you're right on with that. And Sarah, what do you think is the future of beer marketing?
Ash has suggested that I get into TikTok, and I've gone down a rabbit hole. And just based on my own consumption of TikTok, I think that's where we're going. I feel like the beer industry is typically a little older skewing, so like 30 to 60 is kind of the demographic that we're in. And I think the more people get on it, the more we are going to just kind of like Instagram, I think, is just going to become a new TikTok, or TikTok's going to become a new Instagram, whatever. It always takes like a little bit of time for the older demographics to get into like the newer social media platforms. And I think we're seeing that happen now. And I think it's just going to continue in the short form video format. They can be educational. They can also just be fun. And I think you get a lot more out of them than just like a Instagram photo, obviously. But it doesn't take as much time as like a long form YouTube video. So I think it's a little bit more accessible to a lot more people. And honestly, I like their algorithm. I feel like they have me pinned down real hard.
Well, and I think, going back to like TikTok, it's like there's so much educational content out there that is like shorter form. So it's like, obviously YouTube is needed for longer form, but like where else can I kind of do smaller clips that are really to the point, and every platform is so different. So I think you have to address that, as a marketer. We do have a few questions from our attendees. I want to make sure that they're addressed. The first one we have is, how important are hashtags, and how do you know which ones to use? I don't know if Sarah, you want to kind of jump into that one. I know you definitely use them quite often in your content. So
I think so YouTube tells you themselves that their hashtags aren't necessarily important for like search or whatever. It's only if you have a topic that is slightly misspelled that hashtags become important in the YouTube algorithm, apparently. That being said, Instagram, I think they're extremely important. I always hashtag craft beer, home brewing, homebrew. There's like a whole list that you can go down. Just beer, women who brew, that kind of stuff. That just makes you more visible to your audience. So if you don't hashtag anything, like if I don't hashtag anything, it's because I think whatever I'm posting is personal and I only want like my followers to find it basically. Versus if I'm hashtagging, it's like, oh, I'm reaching out to the broader world and like this will be easily searchable and whatnot. Yeah, I mean, if you want to be seen, hashtag. If you don't want to, don't. And those are like two very different ways you can function in a social media landscape. But yeah, it's just kind of what you want to do.
Great. And we have a question. I'm going to throw this one to Nat. So, and Sarah, if you have something to add on after, please. Is it better to have a focused target audience like, women in beer, or make your content clear and more like approachable for like an international audience if English isn't their first language,
That is interesting. I mean, if I were to look at my split of followers, like at this point, I still believe I have more men than women just because beer is still quite male dominated. Mm-hmm. So I do feel that my podcast is intended for women specifically because I often feel I want other female listeners to feel like, oh, I've learned the steps that I can take if I want to do something similar in my career. But I do know that I have men that listen to it. And so with the podcast specifically, I feel I'm creating that more towards a female audience. But if men listen, great. But with my social media, I just want everyone to learn more about beer. So I don't think there's a need to kind of make it very gender specific. And sadly, just looking at one of the comments in the chat, what I was saying, it would be great if women made themselves a bit more visible on their accounts. Someone was sharing a story of women losing followers because of that. But I think if that is the case, tag me in those posts and I will go follow you because that is what I want to see more of. And yes, those are, very small-minded people who would think, oh, I only want to follow dudes who write about beer. We know our stuff as well. So the more of us that get out there and back each other, we can create content for everyone.
We have 2 more minutes left. Oh my gosh. Okay. So we'll throw this question to Sarah. How does monetization on something like Instagram work as like a home brewer / digital creator, I guess?
So there's really like, if you're speaking about monetization like the same way YouTube does, where you get like 0.06 cents or whatever per view or whatever, that doesn't really exist on Instagram. I know they're trying to implement it into the IGTV, but I think it's still only select like super large accounts that are doing it, and you have to be super active on IGTV. So it's basically they're trying to like take the YouTube model into their IGTV. How you monetize your Instagram is actually by doing brand partnerships, and that is, we're still figuring it out. And I went part-time at my gallery job in an attempt to actually, kind of start to make a living from my media presence, essentially. And, it takes a lot of business partner. And so I'm the kind of person who I hate asking for things, and I just have extreme social anxiety. So I know that what you should be doing is you can reach out to brands, you have your media deck, you never send your pricing before you send your media deck, you negotiate, and you ask what their budget is. You never give your rates until you figure out what their budget is. Because if you're working for someone who, like, say you have a media presence like I do, and someone just wants to send you product for a post. I mean, I'm the kind of person who, if it's homebrewing equipment I really want, I'll do it. I'm like, whatever. Yeah, give me the stuff. I'm addicted to receiving homebrew products. But if it's a brand, you're like, whatever. It's like, a soda brand, whatever. You obviously don't want to just trade product for a comment or whatever. So you have to negotiate your rates, and I don't know what the going wisdom is anymore, but I think it's, at one point it was like for every 10,000 followers, it's like $100 per post or something, is the going rates. But I mean, you can Google that as well. There's a lot of different theories about how to get into that.
I've charged more than that because I'm like, if you want to be associated with my beer expertise and you want me to be associated with your brewery, you're going to have to pay for my name being associated with yours. So it's not just the content, it's the value they're getting from you as a creator.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, always remember your worth, and your content is probably so much better than the content out there, and it's so informative, and you're expert. So I hope that everyone listening, that remember that when you go into it, remember your value, your worth, your reach, your network. With that said, we actually have reached our time, unfortunately. But thank you both so much. I just want to quickly do like a cheers and know, like, what are you drinking? Or I know Sarah's drinking something she homebrewed. So.
Oh, nice. Sarah, tell us about your
I don't know where
beer.
my bottle is. I think I left my bottle in the kitchen.
Okay.
So,
well, I got this one, Hibiscus Pale Ale as well. That you brewed.
Nice.
Pink Boots
So we're both
beer.
drinking my homebrew. So I am drinking the Casa Flora. This is a saison that was aged with a culture called Casa Flora by Conscious Ales, and they added 10 pounds of cherries to this 5-gallon batch, and it's been fermenting for over a year, and we finally got it, and it's delicious. It's
that looks beautiful. I'm jealous.
It's so good.
Well, I've got a small IPA. It's a 3% IPA from Quantock Brewing Company. They're based out in Somerset. And they just sent me their Pink Boots brew, which is called Big Boots to Fill. And they sent some of these along with it. So yeah, trying some of their other beers. It's really tasty.
I love it. I love the label too.
Yeah, I love the low ABV IPA. It's hard to find that around here.
Yeah, they sent one that's 3% and one that's 4%. So yeah, good for when you need to, keep your brain in gear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I have, of course, Sarah's Hibiscus Pale Ale, the Pink Boots beer that we brewed with the Yakima Chief hops blend. Sarah, do you want to talk about that real quick?
Yeah, so it's a very simple pale ale recipe. I think it's just caramel 10 and 2-row with 6 ounces of hibiscus, and it's only got 2 ounces of Pink Boots blend hops. So it's very light, but super drinkable. And the hibiscus really comes through. It kind of tastes like a hibiscus tea. And it's like 5%, I think. But yeah, it was really good. And I'm all out of it. Ash has like the last can.
I know. I was like, should I open it? I was like, yes, it's a special occasion.
I'm going to rebrew
International Beer Summit. Yeah, you have to. It's lovely. It came out very well. We have like a couple more minutes, so I just want to make sure that both of you do kind of point everyone to where they can find out more info and anything else that's upcoming that they should be aware of. So, Nat, if you want to just share with us your socials, your website, all that, that'd be great.
Yeah, everything's pretty simple for me. It's at Beer with Nat on all socials. Beerwithnat.com is my main website. Discovering.beer is where I've got all my beer education content and more about virtual beer school. And in terms of what's upcoming, my next goal is to do a little bit more video. And it's a bit of a confidence thing, I think. I feel good about the other content I've created, but I'm nervous about video. So that's what I want to work on this year. So look out for more of that for me.
Awesome. Sarah?
You can find me on Instagram, Flora_brewing. YouTube is Flora Brewing. The podcast is Brewing After Hours with Sarah Flora. We've got a website, florabrewing.com. And slowly but surely, I want to open a brewery. But first, I've got to actually set up my 20-gallon system here in my garage.
Okay, well, I'm here to help. Well, thank you both so much. This has been amazing. Thank you to everyone that attended today. I also just want a reminder that this event was recorded and will be available to replay a few minutes after the live broadcast at this very same link. You can download the presentation PDF using the green button at the bottom of your screen. And also heads up, Dr. J, who is amazing, will be appearing and chatting in the exhibit hall this afternoon starting at 1 p.m. So definitely tune in for that. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And hope you enjoy the rest of the panels and the speakers over this weekend. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.
Woo.